welcome. Today's webinar is Right-Sizing Your DMS, Smarter SharePoint Strategies with MacroView. I'm your host today, Trish Nagy. I'm the Marketing Director here at Act Group. I'll be moderating our session today with Shane Taylor and Andy Brown. Today's session is about rethinking how law firms and professional services manage their documents. Now, for some, a full DMS like an iManage or a NetDocs is the right fit, but for many, SharePoint offers a smarter, more flexible alternative. And with MacroView, it extends the value of that DMS without adding complexity or cost. So that's what we're going to show you today. We're going to show you how Outlook, Teams, and SharePoint can finally work as one. And you're not wasting hours searching through folders and untangling email chains. I am going to get to a few housekeeping rules here. On today's webinar, everyone is in listen-only mode, but we do highly encourage questions. Please feel free to use the chat box during the entire session as questions come up for you. We do have time reserved at the end for the Q&A. I'll be popping back on to help manage that and make sure that all your questions get answered today. Also, just be aware, please, the session is being recorded, and we will share the recording after today's session, and it will be available on demand on our website as well. So without further delay, I'm going to hand the mic over to Shane and Andy to introduce themselves.
Fabulous. Thank you, Trish. Good afternoon, all. I know we've got some delegates on from the US and Australia as well. So I guess good morning and good evening to some of you as well. So I'm Shane Taylor. I'm the partner at Act Group. I'll tell you a little bit more about Act Group if you don't know who we are. But I'm responsible for EMEA for the Act Group. So lovely to meet you all. Thank you for joining today for our webinar. Andy, quick intro.
Yep, and I'm Andy Brown. I'm the UK Technology Director at Act Group, working alongside Shane here in the UK.
Fabulous. Right, so on with the show. As Trish said, a few housekeepings. Don't worry, we're in listen-only mode, but you can submit questions. Please do. The questions you're thinking about, I'm sure a lot of the other delegates will be as well. And it is being recorded, so we're going to share it with you. So don't worry about furiously writing down notes. We'll share everything with you, so you can go back over it at your own pace. So that's today. Who are Act Group and how do we fit in with MacroView? Well, we've been around for a number of years, since 2007. We operate in the enterprise space globally, so we're an Australian headquartered business. But with major hubs in the US and in the UK. And we have a long history with the professional services sector. Myself and Andy Act Group, we've been here for a few months, but we've been working in the legal sectors for probably best part of, well, Andy, probably about 7, I'm probably nearer 20 years. So a sector we know and love dearly. As far as us as a business, we're everything from documents. We're born out of physical document management, physical print, and we've kind of evolved into digital documents, digital print, but also there's a lot more to what we do as well. But today we're focused on the whole aspect of digital documents. We provide a full service around training, support, professional services. So again, it's not just providing the technology, it's actually providing the delivery and the wrap of that technology as well. We're split into 3 divisions. I'll start from bottom up, but the software division does bespoke software development. People like Six Rent a Car actually use our software when they're checking in, checking out rental cars. At ID, which is our cyber division, probably a webinar for another day, but a lot around open source intelligence, pre-crime, really exciting stuff in that space as well. Today is all about AtDocs, our AtDocs division, and around our Microsoft 365 in particular solutions. As you would hope for a business of our size and for the amount of time that we've been around for many years, we have lots and lots of valued customers, some very well-known brands as well, and across sectors. So who are MacroView, if you've not heard of them? And a lot of the customers I talk to in the UK Many haven't heard of them, but it's actually a business, it's a technology business, software development business that's been around since 1994. So it's by no means bleeding edge technology that's just come to market. They operate globally, they operate cross language, and as you'll see today, we think they've got an amazing solution that really starts to bring Microsoft 365 alive. And as you would think, we're a Microsoft partner. We work very, very closely with them as we basically sit on top of their ecosystem. So into what does an effective information management solution look like? And I guess this is the target of where we're all trying to get to. So we've got our structured data, we've got our unstructured data, and there's a number of things that we want to do across this around rights management, document management. We want to collaborate with colleagues and customers, and we need to kind of keep that knowledge a central point. To do that, we need some kind of content management solution, which for legal generally has been standalone document management systems. Now, if we start to look at this model in a Microsoft 365 environment, this really is where it's not just legal, it's cross-legal, but these are some of the challenges. It's an amazing ecosystem that we all love and use, but what's starting to happen now is documents can reside in a number of different areas. I mean, we're talking to customers. Spoke to one recently that has more Teams channels than employees. So, and you know, maybe you're starting to see that as well. We've got SharePoint, we've got shared files, we've got personal OneDrives, and it can become quite confusing quite quickly. What does that mean? Well, from the analyst point of view, people looking for documents, hundreds of hours. I think we've all been here. Where is that document? Where was it shared? And of course, when we found it, is it the right one? Am I actually looking at the same document as the customer in the same version? So there's I think just about any business and any person has gone through that, and then the chaos that ensues. There are also some security fears, you know, and we need to look at those, the data, the documents, and the governance of those documents as well. So MacroView, and I'm going to be at a very high level here, and the best way to show this technology is through a demo, which I'll hand over to Andy in a second. But basically, MacroView provides a view across your entire 365, and it provides a number of features and functionalities that you don't get out of the box with your normal M365. So it's basically filling in, we think, a lot of the gaps that maybe has stopped firms from looking at this as a real solution for their document management. So that's it for me for now. Andy, if I could hand over to you for the demo.
Yeah, thank you, Shane. Yeah, so sort of a bit more from me, I guess, in terms of why you should be listening to me, I guess, and why I think this is a good bit of software. So I do have a long background in the world of enterprise, as well as obviously working alongside Shane in a number of organizations now for the last 10 years or so. Prior to that, I was in the finance world, looking after enterprise systems and everything from kind of Windows NT forwards through the deployment of the early Office suites, etc. And obviously more recently, the transition across to M365. And I think one of the things that's really struck me is as Microsoft has built out the M365 cloud solution, we've ended up with a very interesting world where, as Shane alluded to, there's a real plethora of repositories for information now. And trying to navigate around all of that is getting harder and harder. And this is actually a problem that's getting more and more out of control. And it's been fascinating since we've started working with MacroView, how many customers I talk to about this are basically in the same place, where if they don't have a traditional DMS solution, then what they have usually is M365 as the source of truth for their data. And very often they've got an element of content chaos starting to build up across it. Whereas, interestingly, in particular for legal sector, which I know are a number of you are on the call from that world, they have an interesting other challenge alongside all of this. They've deployed obviously M365 and indeed paid for the licensing for it. But they've also got this standalone silo of data in a traditional DMS as well. And we've got some really interesting challenges starting to build up there about data that's disconnected from where Microsoft are obviously going with their journey going forwards with the deployment of more and more features on the M365 stack. So there's quite a lot that we can dig into there. You can see we've got quite a few things to cover here in the live demonstration. So I'm going to start sharing my screen up now, and you should now be able to see my SharePoint site. So this is my demo environment. This is something that has been created to effectively give a view of the world that is similar, I guess, to what you would see in many organizations if you look at M365. So I've got a number of SharePoint sites here that can be for all kinds of different reasons. They could be, each team could have their own environment. You could have news pages, you can have even, support desk pages, and indeed, sort of like central hub areas that are like, where communication would happen. And one of the interesting things that has already, built up over time is the fact that there are document stores across all of these various areas that are really starting to fill up with all kinds of information. And for end users, we have the obvious interesting challenge of, right, I know as Shane mentioned, I know I have data, but I'm not entirely sure where it is anymore. And so if we cut across to a very, common tool set that we'll see in any organization, here we are in, our traditional Outlook client. And as you can see, we've got our emails flowing into our inbox. This is obviously a demo email, so it's filling up with Google Alerts in this case. And here is where you start to see the MacroView add-in bringing more DMS-like capabilities into the SharePoint experience. So out of the box, what MacroView will do is we install a piece of software as a client, usually on the endpoint in this case, and it will run in the context of the user and map out what it can see across Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive, so that you have this tree-like view, this traditional Explorer type view, start to build up. And very quickly, you can then start to interact with that data from within the Outlook client, which is a very familiar workflow, in particular in the legal sector where they use DMS solutions today. So if I click onto my document store, all of those documents that you just saw in the browser are now actually available to me within here in the Outlook client. I've got preview capabilities within here so that I can actually start to see those documents and click into them if that's something I want to do in terms of, viewing all of the various file types, whatever they may be, that will be here available to me. In addition to that, another piece of functionality that many people will be familiar with is the concept of email filing. So if we are in a situation where we want to start to file email messages away into SharePoint, then we can start to do a sort of, again, a DMS-like capability where we can take an email. And here's an example of just drag and drop. I can literally just drag an email across, and in the background that will start to upload a copy of that email. Here we go. And that will then get stored away into SharePoint and is now available back across there. You'll see now, not only has the email been stored away, but it's also been flagged. So I can now see that that email is a filed email and indeed where it's been filed to. So if I go back here, obviously, conversely, I can now see that that email that I just dragged across, here we go, is now available to me here. So, I've got that same view of the data, but now the data itself is stored on, in this case, SharePoint. Same could apply to Teams or OneDrive if that was something you particularly wanted to do, usually SharePoint. So we've got the concept of email filing here in terms of just, an end user could choose to file an email, and that's obviously really useful. We also have the concept, though, of much more capable filing when it comes to, if I look at the MacroView plugin here now, I can start to run rules to actually file emails on a more automated basis. So as a user, I can start to create rules to say, for received emails or for emails that I send, I can start to create a rule, and within these rules, I can start to say, I'm going to start to build up a rule set. So if the subject contains a certain keyword, for example, or whatever it may be, and the properties, you can obviously do it if it's from a certain person, if it's to a certain person, if the body contains certain keywords, all kinds of things you can start to do. And those conditions can add up to create a really quite powerful set of rules. And then you can say where you want to save that email to. And those rules then are something that the user can choose to either run themselves. So they could literally just say, right, rather than have it just running in the background, I'll just choose when I want to file my email. But usually what will often happen is you can actually start to just set this to automatically file based on those rules. And obviously then in the background, MacroView will start applying those rules, and as email goes into or out of the inbox, it will start to file those emails away into SharePoint. Alongside that is where we can get into some really quite powerful solutions when it comes to the concept of managed email filing and rules. And this is where something that is very familiar to legal people on the call is the concept of luggage tagging. So this is where you can create a unique code, usually in the subject line, that will be some kind of unique numbering / lettering system that we can interpret and apply a general rule, and we can push that rule out to all the users, and then they will all be filing to the same locations across the SharePoint environment. And that can be something that there's literally one rule to apply for all, because if you've got the numbering system in a format that is logical and makes sense, then we can actually start to see, and I'll touch on this when I switch across to viewing SharePoint in more detail and matter management, the concept of the rule will understand the concept of matter number equals this area, therefore file to this location. And this is something that is smart. It's a smart engine. It's only going to file the email once. You're not going to end up with duplicate data. We can have all kinds of rules to state, are you going to file the attachments as well? How are those going to get saved away? All this kind of good stuff. We've got capability there. So there's a lot going on there in terms of the tree view. Within this tree view, obviously, if you turn this on in your environment, you could end up with a very complicated view of the world, if you think about how many sites are already on SharePoint. But you can also, the users themselves can start to create favorites. So they can go within the tree and they can start to say, right, I actually only interact with these areas. I'm only really interested in these areas, for example. So let's only work on those. Or what is also particularly useful for users, and this is something that builds up over time and can be exceptionally useful, is the concept of shared files. So this is where files get shared around organizations all the time. They might be sent to you from another person's OneDrive. They may have been shared with you as a link from all kinds of places. And keeping track of all those different files is something that is hard to do. So there's automatically within favorites, we have the concept of the shared files. These are all the files that have been shared with me. And that very quickly shortcuts back to, obviously, a piece of information that you'd be very interested to interact with again, usually. So we've got that capability, and then further down in here, we've got the concept of recent files, recent searches that we've undertaken, and recent locations. And then we have the concept of search as well. And this is where we can get into some really complicated stuff. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in a second, because as well as this being available within Outlook, we actually also have the concept of a DMS Explorer, which is a standalone application, which is effectively like Windows Explorer, but for SharePoint. And this is where we can get into some really quite interesting capabilities. The UI is obviously very similar, familiar. So for end users, if they'll switch between the two in a very natural way, because clearly it's the same basic categories of capability. But what we can start to do is expose all kinds of further capabilities. Most of these are actually available in Outlook as well, but they start to make more sense from a demo perspective to show you it here as a standalone, so it's not as cluttered. But let's say, we've got this concept of this particular document I'm using for a demo purposes, and a really interesting thing that is very relevant for DMS users in particular is version history. And this is something that is stored in SharePoint, but it's actually quite hard to expose and see what's going on. So with MacroView, we've got plugins and capabilities to actually really expand out the concept of versioning so that you can really see all of the versions. You can start to see, commentary about those versions. So as people save them away, they're prompted to populate this kind of information. And indeed, you can start to, end users have the power to really start thinking about, do I need to go backwards? Do I need to just view the prior version, whatever it may be? Very powerful user tool, that. Also here, we've got all kinds of additional capabilities when it comes to what you would expect in terms of, you can obviously open, you can start to check in, check out if that's something you want to do, to deliberately lock files to stop co-authoring, although obviously for a lot of organizations, co-authoring is actually one of the big benefits of being on M365 itself. But you can have all of those capabilities there. You can start to manage access. And also, if I touch down here into the properties of the file, we will start to see lots of interesting information starting to be filled out. And I'll touch on this a little bit more because this is just a standard SharePoint site. It's starting to show me all of the file information that is there on SharePoint today, but it's actually quite hard to expose in the web UI. So if there are specific information that you're interested in, it's that you can start to get to that quite quickly. So we've touched on quite a bit there. I think probably a good place to go next is, as I mentioned, the search panel. So this is one of the real powers of MacroView. So as well as having the MacroView visible solutions running in the background, we also have the MacroView client running here in our system tray. And that client is effectively sat running in the context of the end user that is logged in here, and is effectively looking at SharePoint in the background, and it is indexing and looking across SharePoint so that you get a good responsive view of the world when you're looking at SharePoint. So, when we start to search, this is where things can get quite powerful. If I want to run a search, you'll see I've just run a keyword search there for the phrase NDA, and it is brought me back 107 documents. And you will see those documents are all over SharePoint and potentially Teams and OneDrive, depending on the scope you've set for the search. You'll see I've set this across the whole of SharePoint. It's brought back all of those files really quickly. And obviously I can start to view those, interact with those if that's what I want to do. So keyword search alone is a really powerful search tool, and you can get quite powerful with this kind of capability, because obviously you can start to say looking for exact phrase, looking for any keywords, none, excluding words, all that kind of good stuff. And that can be a search both of document naming and also of content within documents, assuming it's a document type that's logical for it to view into. But you will be able to effectively search across all of this. What we can then start to do beyond keyword search, though, is where we can start to really drill into the customization capabilities of MacroView as well. So we can start to look at, let's say, email search to start off with. So out of the box, you would get your kind of standard, if emails have been filed away, you can start to really search into, who's it from, who's it to, does it have attachments, all the stuff you would expect to be able to do, but you're doing it across all of the data stores on SharePoint you have access to. But this is where we start to look at the concept of, in particular, if you're a legal firm or professional services, the concept of matter is obviously really important if you want to search for a certain matter number or a certain matter name, or you can start to have the concept of matter type. And these are custom labels. These are not preset. We can configure these alongside your naming conventions inside your firm. And when we say matter type, for those of you who aren't from a legal firm, that could potentially be, a job type or a project type, all sorts of ways of categorizing repeatable workflows. This is what this tool set is for. And you can see we can really start to drill into the concept of searching for all kinds of capabilities there. And indeed, we can start to think about matters in terms of the metadata of the matter itself. Is this an active matter? Is this something we've closed? Is it pending on hold, etc.? Again, that's all configurized, can be configured, configurized, terrible word, can be configured as per your requirements in your environment. So there's a lot of capability there in search, and that links back to the capabilities really. If I go back to my favorites, you'll see we can really start to build out the concept of a DMS within SharePoint itself. So, here in the browse capability, I've created effectively a demo hub, which is this is using hub site capabilities in SharePoint. So you can start to create a hierarchy of site, which makes very good visual logical sense when it's exposed in this tree form. But actually, ironically, although this is native functionality in terms of Microsoft, it's very hard to view your tree in a logical way when it comes to hub sites. So you can within this case, you can start to create different areas of your firm so that they each logically can work within their areas. And all of this, it can be configured to your heart's content in terms of the way the structure looks. This is just an example, but you can start to build out the concept of different areas. And then within areas, you could potentially have different clients. And within there, you can start to create the concept of matters. So, here we have the concept of, a matter, which is, in this case, we've called it audit. And within there, we can see all of the files, but we can also see structure within there. And we can start to really build on the power of SharePoint and the customization of SharePoint in the back end and therefore into MacroView. So we can start to have things that, again, for traditional DMS users, are very important pieces of metadata that start to get stored against the files as they are put away. So, a unique document ID. This is actually something that SharePoint can do for you, and you can start to create really quite useful metadata just within your naming conventions here. But in this case, we're using SharePoint capability. So you've got a unique document ID for every document. You've got the matter number. In this case, it's a fairly simple example, but you've got a matter number stored against it. And you can start to see, if I now go to the properties of these files again, because they've been stored into a matter-centric area, we start to see more information coming to life because it's starting to inherit information and indeed from where it's been stored away. So this has a document type of document because it's been filed in this particular folder. And indeed, we've got additional document authoring capabilities. We want to store that away as specific information. And all of this starts to get saved as custom properties against those files, which is really useful. So although you didn't see it on screen, the fact is that this matter has a status of active. Therefore, this document now has that metadata stored against it as well. And this is obviously really important and useful information when you start to go into, how do you report on all of this information and drill against it? Because obviously you will reach a point where you actually need to close a matter down or whatever it may be. So, for the purposes of this particular matter on matter demo, it's currently showing active, but there's nothing to stop us, if we have the permissions to do so, to actually state that this is now closed. And away we go. And that will get saved away to SharePoint, and that's now been updated. And this is a really powerful tool set. And when it comes to matter inception, many of you will have tool sets in your practice management or whatever your matter inception processes are that may have conventions and naming and numbering that you can use. Conversely, if you don't, you can also start to build in the concept of matter creation here. So if I want to create a new matter, I could start to have all kinds of templates again that we could create. Let's create a new matter, and it's going to have all kinds of a full set of folders created within it, and we can really start to build out the concept of matter creation as well here. Now we can either align to other automation you've already got, or this can be something that can be a manual process if you want to do something separate, say project initiation, whatever it may be. There's a lot of capabilities and customization we can cover here. So there's a lot going on there in terms of the demo and the capabilities in terms of how you can start to create a DMS-like view of the world that will be very familiar for users, but with SharePoint ultimately as the data store that sits behind it. And this is exposed across the Microsoft stack. So a common use case and example will be, if someone creates a new document and they are, right, I've got to save that away. If they don't have an easy way to save it in the right place, they'll usually save it in the wrong place. And so a lot of people will just save it onto, let's say, their OneDrive as the default location and then share from there, which is clearly probably not what you want. But within Word, and indeed right across the Office suite, you've got the concept of save as directly to SharePoint. And this brings up the same view of the world as they have and interact with. So their favorites, they can browse, they have their recent locations, all of this good stuff, so that they can save it in the right place first time. So there's a lot going on there. I've obviously touched on quite a bit. I'll just finish off by saying, obviously, I've done a lot of demonstration here in Outlook Classic and the ability for us to, have, let's get that toolbar to open up probably. Come on, there we go. So we've got all kinds of search capabilities, browse capabilities, all in Classic Outlook. I've touched on all of this already. And, I've got the concept of, viewing documents from within Outlook that I've showed you already. But crucially, I've had lots of people say, well, does this work in modern Outlook? And of course, the answer is, well, yes, of course it does. So here's modern Outlook. Here is DMS Next loaded as a modern application into modern Outlook. And you can see the same tree view, browse, favorites capabilities exposed here, but in modern Outlook as well. And all of that functionality is available there too, depending on the version, obviously, you have deployed in your environment. So I guess, Shane, that's kind of all of the areas I had inside the demo for today. I don't know if you want to pick up from there for me.
Yes, yes, indeed. Let me go over to there. So hopefully you're seeing my back to the presentation. Thank you very much, Andy. That's a great demo as always. So we've put together this slide here just to try and bring to life what you get with and without MacroView. Don't worry about noting everything down. There's quite a lot of information on it. But you can see it in the recording. We'll share the slides as well. But some of the you'll see straight away it's about the ability to find documents and know which version of documents that you're working on. Auto filing is a big one. Even within legal, they've been used to this kind of functionality, but outside of legal, it's maybe not functionality that you've had before. So managing client communications can be a huge benefit. There's lots of governance, that we can bring to it as well with the metadata that we're bringing into the documents as well. So we're providing the ability to actually find documents and deal with them a lot better. One thing that comes up quite a lot, and no presentation would be complete without a mention of AI in some way, shape, or form. So, Andy, much more qualified than me, but what's your thoughts around AI, Copilot, and quite frankly any others, and when it comes to this whole document management arena?
Big question. So there's a lot going on there. I think the world of M365 is obviously very increasingly closely aligned to Copilot, and obviously Microsoft are taking their customers on a journey when it comes to the implementation of Copilot features and capabilities. I think early days, we've seen some really interesting examples of Copilot adoption resulting in information being found and used where potentially an organization didn't realize the user had access to it. So there's an element of security through obscurity that comes with AI adoption, that in and of itself is something that MacroView can help to manage, just simply because users will out of the box be able to see the information they have access to with MacroView as well. And that may sound a little bit like, well, how's that help? But the point is, it means you have to solve that problem, and this is a great way of doing so, because it becomes a little bit more self-policing than just pure security through obscurity and data being found via a prompt alone. I think alongside this, if we talk to the legal clients who are on board the call today, that a big challenge with a DMS that's a standalone data silo is obviously the Microsoft view of the world, and the adoption of Copilot is very hard to integrate into that. And the DMS providers themselves are obviously looking for ways to create bridges between their data stores and Copilot, but also their own AI solutions. And all of that is a little bit clunky compared to taking something that is natively stored on Microsoft out of the box. And I think that's the key thing here is, and it's not just relating to AI. I think one of the key things that MacroView gives you as a business benefit is the fact that because your data is stored on M365, that means that all kinds of tool sets start to apply to that data and to the way you may say back up and do governance across it, the ability to use, Purview, for example, to do all kinds of extra security and governance capabilities across that data, the ability to back it up in the tool of your choice, and probably much cheaper than some of the bolt-ons you may be paying for elsewhere. The list goes on because the data is effectively empowered by being on the Microsoft stack itself. So long-winded answer. Hopefully that helps, Shane.
Yes, thank you, Andy. That's excellent. Thank you. So just to wrap up, really. So just try and summarize today's webinar and also go through some of the questions that you've shared with us. So hopefully you've seen from today, it's this kind of familiar view. So implementing a technology that's not going to completely distort the way your users see the world. As Andy's demonstrated, the ease of dragging and dropping in between the M365 stack is really, really easy. The great search capabilities as well. This should be a huge time savings for your users, and that kind of ability to enrich the data within those or the metadata within those documents. And as well, we showed saving from Word, but again, if you try and save from Excel or PowerPoint, you get the green line or the ready pink line. So it's a very familiar view to the customers and or your users. And then that kind of ability to automatically file inbound and outbound emails as well can be great for client engagement. As far as Act Group, we are the global distributor for MacroView, so and we're able to provide a complete managed wrap around that as well. And a big part, if you are looking to take some of your users or even all of your users outside of your DMS, that's not a simple overnight job as well. So migration services is something we can absolutely help with. It's worth mentioning that the webinar is called Right Sizing Your DMS. So we appreciate for a lot of customers, the thought of taking everyone out of your DMS and straight into SharePoint might be a big step. For some firms, that has absolutely been the case. But there is the ability to also take some of your users out of your DMS that maybe don't need that level of document management and actually probably prefer to be within SharePoint. I guess the big one, the attention grabber, is typically we're seeing between 30 to 50% saving on enterprise licenses, MacroView versus traditional DMS. So that's really helped customers focus their attention due to the commercial aspects of that. It's very easy to implement the technology and very easy to do a demo of the technology. So we're offering a 30-day trial if you're interested in having a look and a play around yourself. So don't worry, the QR code will remain. You can also reach out on LinkedIn. Please connect. We share lots of information on LinkedIn. There'll be lots of other great content for you to enjoy, and it'd be great to connect with you anyway. And or drop us an email, however you want to get in touch. So hopefully you've enjoyed today. There is a lot more to the product than even we've covered today, but hopefully it's given you a good flavour. Trish, have we had any questions from our delegates?
We did, excuse me. First of all, thank you both very much. Excuse my voice. For the demonstration today. I think it was super informative. I did get a question about just kind of clarifying the governance benefits. There were a couple of questions just around, is it possible to manage like a policy through MacroView? Is that what you're implying?
To an extent, yes. I mean, what we're doing is lighting up the capabilities that sit within the Microsoft stack when it comes to data governance in particular. So I think the way to look at this is we will be using a data store that has rich governance and security capabilities within it. MacroView is the lens that sits across all of that data as a result.
Good. Let's see. We have Rebecca Buckfield who has raised her hand. So, Rebecca. Let's see. I think I allowed her to speak if she wants to unmute for a moment.
Oh, no pressure.
Maybe I know, she's gonna be famous
Maybe
now.
press the wrong button as well.
Yeah. So
All good.
you may need to type it into the chat. I did enable you to unmute yourself, Rebecca, but I'm not sure if that's working. So I'll just go ahead and ask another question while you try to maybe toggle your mute button. So I have another question about the metadata. Can MacroView access the data is a question, or is it just looking at the metadata to provide the search functionality?
So search is ultimately something that is based on both file information, but also file content. So MacroView is indexing across all of the information that it has access to on SharePoint. So it's building up that index based on, let's say, file name. So let's say I use that NDA term. It can be on file name, but it can also obviously be on terms used within documents themselves. And it stores its indexing metadata locally, so it gets that fast response time.
Okay, very good. Can field names be customized, such as changing every instance of matter to job?
Absolutely, yeah. As mentioned in the demo, there's an awful lot of customization we can do here in terms of configuration and customization. If you look at that client out of the box, we can effectively rename pretty much any label. We can hide or gray out certain options if that's something we want to do for a user or a particular group of users, whatever it may be. But when it comes to some of those custom content panels, yeah, absolutely sky's the limit there to a certain extent. So when I talked about matter, that could be project, that could be job, that can be whatever you want it to be.
Maybe one here for you, Shane. How is MacroView licensed? What drives the cost for like firms of various sizes?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Trish. So it's a very modular pricing, which is really nice because we do hear that with some other solutions, it's kind of all or nothing. So yeah, depending on the functionality you want, you can have licensing on there. Clearly, the more users you have, there's a linear scale on that. It's also worth mentioning that you don't need to implement MacroView for everyone. So you could go down to business unit, or you may want to implement for everyone, but have different features and functionality available for those groups. So again, we can be very granular on how we price that up, which makes it even more cost effective.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that if you are obviously licensing for a subset of users, the coexistence with the rest of the users is really, really good, because clearly the back-end data stores and the back-end is SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, etc. Those UIs still exist for everybody else. And so you've got really rich coexistence capabilities there as well.
And one more question that's probably on top of everyone's minds, but can you go into a little bit more about how MacroView prepares a firm's data for AI tools like Copilot?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a really interesting one because one of the things that Copilot is ultimately designed to do is obviously build an index on top of your data stored in your tenant. One of the things that MacroView themselves are doing is they've developed a Copilot agent that actually allows you to interact using Copilot directly into the MacroView engine, which can be quite interesting because one of the things that it will do is allow you to use the power of the MacroView indexing capability, but expose it out through Copilot. Because one of the observations that we've seen from some clients is that knowing which version of the truth Copilot has built its answering on sometimes can be a little bit haphazard. So there's that there. I think beyond that, there's some really interesting capabilities. So as I mentioned about the concept of extending the file properties, so if we think about matter and content and the ability to have extended properties of the files that are like matter type, document type, because that information is ultimately, embedded in the files as well, that means it's exposed to other software and agents and capabilities that are looking at the same data source. So you can actually start to use Copilot to query across that data because it's got enriched metadata against it.
Very good. Well, of course, somebody can always follow up with you directly if they want to talk more about that AI readiness aspect or any of these other business challenges and solutions. That I don't have any more questions coming through the chat right now. So I will hand it back over to you both to close out today's session.
Yeah, I mean we've covered a lot of ground. Thank you, Trish. As we said, please get in touch. We're going to send out a copy of the recording, or you can request the slides as well. No, the only thing from me really is, thank you for coming on, listening, and we look forward to talking further and more specifically around your requirements and how this might work for you. Andy?
Yeah, exactly what Shane said. So yeah.
Good night from me. So yeah, thanks again, and look forward to speaking to you all soon.
Brilliant. Cheers
Thank
all.
you, Shane and Andy. Have a good day.
Cheers. Bye bye.